You've been watching the public portion of President Trump's meeting with Chancellor Merz of Germany. There are some news items that came out of this, three that come to mind, and we'll go through them. Number one, the tweet this morning that came out from the president about his conversation with Chinese President Xi Jinping referred to the intricacies of our recently made and agreed to trade deal. Well, he underscored that and said that there's a good deal that's been made, and we just need to all make sure we understand it. That would be huge news for the market and for tariffs in general. Secondly, the back and forth with Elon Musk. In the last 48 hours, Elon Musk has put out 70-plus tweets about the big, beautiful bill in his time in the administration. President Trump, for the first time on camera, addressed that directly. He said he was disappointed in the critiques from Elon Musk, said he was well-versed in the intricacies of the bill. And then the line out of that meeting was, Elon and I had a great relationship. I don't know if we will have one anymore. Elon Musk has been tweeting back in real time, saying some positive things about President Trump, praising him for pulling federal funding for the California high-speed rail, but also emphasizing his critiques of the big, beautiful bill. So a little back and forth there. And then finally, on why Egypt was scrapped from that travel ban list, President Trump said, we deal with them closely and Egypt has things under control. There's a lot more, and we will get to all of it here on Outnumbered. Hello, everyone. I'm Kayleigh McEnany, and I'm here with my co-host, Emily Compagno. Also joining us, Rosanna Scotto, Fox 5 anchor and host of the Underground Economy on Fox Nation. Kennedy, host of the Kennedy Saves the World podcast, and David Webb, Fox News contributor. Well, let's start here with the China news. This is a huge deal for the market, for everyone, really. Let's listen to what the president said.
We have a deal with China, as you know, but we were straightening out some of the points having to do mostly with rare earth, magnets, and some other things.
So those reduced trade tariff rates, they remain in effect?
Yeah, we have the deal. I mean, we've had a deal. We announced the deal, and we'll be, I guess you could say, I wouldn't even say finalizing it up, Scott. I would say we have a deal, and we're going to just make sure that everybody understands what the deal is. By the way, he invited me to China, and I invited him here. We both accepted. So I'll be going there with the First Lady at a certain point, and he'll be coming here, hopefully, with the First Lady of China.
I mean, Emily, we discussed on this couch, Scott Bessent said all these other tariffs were pursuant to putting the pressure on China. So if indeed there is a deal that comes in short order, this would be a massive win for the Trump administration.
And we know that Trump at 10:45 a.m. this morning put out the Truth Social talking about this call. And remember, this is on the heels of an hour and 15-minute call he had with Vladimir Putin yesterday. Now today he has an hour and a half call with President Xi. And I think it's interesting to note, too, that he says the conversation was totally focused on trade. Nothing was discussed, he said, concerning Russia, Ukraine, or Iran. And as we talked about, his emissaries will meet with President Xi's emissaries to discuss out the details. As he said, we'll learn them in a moment, or coming shortly. But I think it's really important to note that I think oftentimes, especially in the mainstream media, everything is either siloed when it shouldn't be or totally fuddled together when it shouldn't be. And here, these were two leaders talking only about trade without the sort of encroachment of these other highly important topics, especially as we learned with the Chancellor tomorrow, D-Day anniversary. Like, there's a lot going on globally that our president is involved in. But for that moment, it was very targeted to the benefit of us. And for all of those naysayers who said it wouldn't happen, well, there you go.
It would be a big deal, especially as we get those details. And, you know, there's an irony here. Everyone's looking at Merz and President Trump, but really a lot of people are thinking about the richest man in the world, Elon Musk, and the most powerful man, President Trump, and the back and forth there. Let's listen to what President Trump said about Elon Musk.
And, you know, Elon's upset because we took the EV mandate, and, you know, which was a lot of money for electric vehicles. And, you know, they're having a hard time, the electric vehicles. And they want us to pay billions of dollars in subsidy. And, you know, Elon knew this from the beginning. Look, Elon and I had a great relationship. I don't know if we're well anymore.
Kennedy, so here are some of the tweets that came in real time as the president was saying that. Elon Musk tweeted out, whatever, keep the EV solar incentive cuts in the bill, even though no oil and gas subsidies are touched. Very unfair, but ditch the mountain of disgusting pork, he said. He also, though, said this, sensible move by President Trump on high-speed rail. So he was praising President Trump, too, as this was being discussed in the Oval Office.
Yes, and, there are a lot of people who despise Elon Musk, who hopes that he takes the bait and, turns this into an actual fight. And, but Elon Musk is not Omarosa. Like, he's not going to leave this relationship and throw a tantrum. He said what he had to say. Philosophically, he comes from a very sound position where he wants to limit the size and scope of government. He wants to do the necessary cutting. He hopes that Congress is going to follow suit and codify some of the DOGE cuts beyond the $9 billion rescission package. And it looks like they're not going to. They're going to make things bigger. And his point is, you can either have a big bill or a beautiful bill, but if it's big, it's ugly. And he says slim and beautiful is the way to go. I think that they will probably mend fences. It may not be the coziest relationship. I don't think Elon's going to be the little spoon anymore when they snuggle. But he has enough self-interest here that he will smooth things over with the president.
Trump has a lot of good lines, but Elon Musk is not Omarosa is most definitely the line of the day, Kennedy. I also want to play what the president said about the Autopen investigation. That was announced last night, and here's what he said on it today.
Your predecessor dismissed your Autopen investigation. He said he made all the decisions during his presidency. I'm curious your reaction to his dismissal.
Well, look, the Autopen, I think, is the big scandal. I think the biggest scandal of the last many years is the Autopen. And who's using it? I happen to think I know, okay, because I'm here. And I'm not a big Autopen person, fortunately. I'm glad. I'm very glad. It's an easy way out. But it's a very bad thing, very dangerous. Look, he was never for open borders. He was never for transgender for everybody. He was never for men playing in women's sports. I mean, he changed. I mean, all of these things that changed so radically. I don't think he had any idea that what was, frankly, I said it during the debate, and I say it now, he didn't have much of an idea what was going on.
Mr. President,
he shouldn't be. I mean, essentially, whoever used the Autopen was the president. And that is wrong. It's illegal. It's so bad. And it's so disrespectful to our country.
David, he went on to say that Biden was not for open borders or trans men and women's sports. And I think that's the crux of this. Yeah, the Autopen is part of it. We know Autopens are used by every president. Right. But if he wanted a closed border, which is essentially what we read in much of the reporting, he wanted a crackdown. And someone said, where did the plan go? That's the big question, whether it was done by Autopen or not.
Well, the question is whether Biden ever told the truth or not in all the years, whether he wanted open borders, closed borders, security. We've seen this from Democrats, from Obama, from others, statements in time, Clinton and others, but the actions are different. The actions taken are what matter here. Mm-hmm. Whether by Biden or the cadre in the White House, the fact is those millions that poured across the border, the visa overstays, the northern border, those that were smuggled in other ways, by the way, even from the Bahamas into the Florida area, that's big on human trafficking with all the boats going back and forth. When you look at all of that, that was the result of actions they did or did not take. And that's important because they caused this. By the way, I now have a new word. Fuddled. Omarosa line was great. I have never used fuddled in my life, Emily, but
we're talking about it.
I name it a word. I self-identify it as a word.
Rosanna, the Autopen investigation is interesting. We know it's happening at DOJ, but that's 80% of it, I would say, because that definitely is how the executive orders and much of policy got manifested. But there's another 20% of this, and I think it's the most important part, and that's Afghanistan decision-making. And there wouldn't have been an Autopen used there, but there would have been potentially a mentally incapacitated president in the Situation Room, and we know we lost heroes at the Abbey Gate. So that should be a part of this.
Absolutely. I mean, the president said they are investigating, but what he did say during this little press conference was that he has not found any specific evidence yet that Joe Biden used that Autopen for anything. But, now that we've read the Jake Tapper book on original sins and we find out that Joe Biden has stage 4 prostate cancer and is undergoing treatment, we're worried about his mental state and how it's been the last 4 years. And I think that's why the Autopen becomes so important right now.
Yeah, a lot to uncover, and President Trump intends to get to the bottom of it.
Hey, everyone, I'm Emily Compagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.